It was a quiet evening in the city of Astra, a place where the stars rarely showed their true brilliance because of the never-ending glow of streetlights and neon signs. People rushed through the crowded streets, lost in their own worlds, moving quickly between towering skyscrapers and small, cozy shops. Among them was Alex, a mechanic who worked long hours in a small but well-loved garage on the edge of town. He was the type of person who preferred things simple, nothing too complicated, just a life focused on his work, his tools, and the occasional coffee break. That evening, as Alex was finishing up his last job for the day, the sky suddenly darkened. The air grew colder, and a heavy rain started to pour down. The streets became slick with water, the reflection of neon signs dancing on the surface like colorful ghosts. Most of the workers at the nearby shops had rushed inside, leaving the streets empty and quiet. It was the perfect time for Alex to leave the garage and head home, but as he walked to his old truck, something caught his attention. A figure stood by the side of the road, soaked through by the downpour. She was alone, with no umbrella or jacket to protect her from the rain. Alex hesitated for a moment. It wasn't usual to see someone stranded on this quiet street, especially at this hour. The woman stood still, as if lost in thought, her eyes gazing into the distance. She was young, maybe in her early 20s, with long, wet hair that clung to her face and shoulders. She looked out of place, almost as if she didn't belong in this busy, chaotic city. Alex's instinct kicked in and he walked toward her, concerned that she might be in some kind of trouble. "Hey," he called out, his voice soft but clear over the sound of the rain. "Are you all right?" The woman turned to face him, and Alex was taken aback by her eyes. They were an unusual shade of violet, bright and striking against her pale skin. Her expression was calm, almost serene, as if the storm didn't bother her in the least. She gave him a small, grateful smile. "I'm fine," she said, her voice soft but with a strange, almost melodic quality. "Just lost, I guess." "Where are you headed?" Alex asked, his concern growing. "It's not safe to be out here alone, especially in this weather." She hesitated for a moment, as if unsure how to answer. I don't really know where I am," she admitted, glancing around as though the city was unfamiliar to her. "I just ended up here." Alex glanced at his truck, then back at her. There was no way he could leave her out here, drenched and alone. He had seen enough people in trouble over the years to know when something wasn't right. The woman didn't look like someone who had simply gotten lost. There was an aura about her, something that made Alex feel like she was more than she appeared. "All right," Alex said, deciding to trust his gut. "I'll give you a ride. It's not safe to be out here." "We'll figure out where you're going." The woman smiled again, this time with a touch of relief. "Thank you, I appreciate it." Alex opened the door to his truck and motioned for her to get in. As she slid into the seat beside him, Alex noticed that she seemed to move with an almost unnatural grace. It wasn't just her appearance that stood out. It was her presence, something that seemed otherworldly. He couldn't put his finger on it, but it was as if she didn't belong in this world. "Where are you from?" he asked, trying to make small talk as he started the engine. "You don't look like you're from around here." The woman glanced at him for a moment, her violet eyes studying him carefully. I'm not from here," she said, her voice quieter this time. "I'm far away. I came here by accident, I think." Alex raised an eyebrow, unsure of whether she was joking or not. "By accident? You mean like you just wandered off course or something?" She nodded, but there was an odd sadness in her expression, as if she had lost something important, something she didn't want to talk about. "Something like that," she murmured. Alex didn't press her further, sensing that whatever the truth was, it was something she didn't want to share. He focused on driving through the rain-soaked streets, glancing at the woman from time to time. Her wet clothes clung to her, but she didn't seem to mind. In fact, she seemed completely at peace, as though the rain was nothing more than a passing inconvenience. As they drove through the city, Alex couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. There was something about her, something he couldn't explain. She wasn't like anyone he had ever met before. The way she moved, the way she spoke, it was as if she wasn't entirely human. But Alex pushed the thought aside. He was overthinking things. Maybe she was just a little eccentric. Everyone had their quirks, after all. "So, do you have a place to stay?" Alex asked, trying to keep the conversation going. "You mentioned you got lost, but do you have somewhere to go?" The woman looked out the window, her gaze distant. "I don't have a place to go," she said softly. "I don't even know where to start looking." Alex glanced at her, surprised. You don't know where you're going, you just ended up here and have nowhere to stay? She didn't respond immediately, and Alex could tell she was deep in thought. Finally, she spoke again. I don't really know where I'm supposed to be, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I just want to find my way home. Alex felt a strange pang of sympathy for her. I can help you with that, he said. I might not know exactly where you need to go, but I can get you started. You don't have to figure it all out alone. She turned to look at him, her violet eyes meeting his, and for a brief moment, Alex saw something flicker in her gaze. It was like a flash of recognition, as if she were looking at him in a way that was different, but just as quickly it was gone, replaced by that serene calm. Thank you, she said softly, her lips curling into a smile again. You're very kind. Alex nodded, feeling a little embarrassed by the attention, but he couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to her than met the eye. He continued driving, the rain falling harder now, the world outside becoming a blur of lights and water. But in the truck, it felt strangely calm, as if time had slowed down just for them. After a few minutes, they reached Alex's apartment building, a small, unremarkable place on the edge of the city. He parked the truck and turned off the engine. You can stay here for the night if you want, he offered. I've got an extra room. The woman nodded, though she didn't make any immediate move to get out. Instead, she sat there quietly, staring out the window. Alex waited for a moment, then gently tapped the steering wheel. Is something wrong? He asked, concern creeping into his voice. I thought you might want to get inside and dry off. She turned to him slowly, her eyes filled with a deep, almost mysterious sadness. I'm not sure how to explain this, she said softly. But I think you're the one who was meant to help me. Alex frowned, unsure of what she meant. What do you mean? I'm just offering you a place to stay. It's not a big deal. She shook her head, her expression distant once again. It's more than that, she whispered. You don't realize it yet, but your life is about to change in ways you can't even imagine. The words sent a chill down Alex's spine, though he didn't know why. He wasn't the superstitious type, and he hadn't been expecting anything more than a brief, strange encounter. But something in her voice made him pause. Before he could say anything else, she opened the door and stepped out into the rain. I'll follow you inside, she said, her voice soft but firm. Alex stared at her for a moment, unsure of what to make of the situation. He had offered a simple kindness, but there was more to this woman than he had first thought. As he watched her walk toward the entrance of his building, the rain soaking her clothes, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was only the beginning of something much bigger. And as he followed her inside, he had no idea just how right he was. Alex followed the woman into his apartment, still unsure of what was happening. She moved with that same quiet grace, her wet clothes clinging to her, yet she didn't seem to mind. The apartment was small, with modest furniture and a faint scent of coffee lingering in the air from the morning. He gestured toward the living room, but she simply nodded and took a seat on the couch. Make yourself comfortable, Alex said, still trying to act casual, though he felt uneasy. I'll grab you a towel or something to dry off. She didn't respond, but her eyes followed him as he moved to the small bathroom. He returned quickly with a towel, tossing it gently to her. She caught it without looking, and then began drying her hair. Alex couldn't help but notice how delicate her hands seemed, how carefully she handled the towel, almost as if she were accustomed to much more refined surroundings. Thanks, she finally spoke, her voice soft and distant. I didn't expect anyone to be this kind. Alex sat across from her, his mind racing with questions. So, you're not from around here, huh? You keep saying that. What exactly do you mean by that? Lyra, as she had introduced herself, looked at him with her striking violet eyes. She smiled faintly but didn't answer right away. There was a faraway look in her gaze, as if she were processing something deep in her mind, something from another place entirely. I'm from a faraway place, she began, her voice almost a whisper. A place beyond this world, beyond even the stars you know. Alex blinked, his brain struggling to make sense of what she was saying. Beyond the stars, he repeated half-jokingly. You mean like another country or something? Lyra's gaze softened. Not a country, but a kingdom among the stars far from here. For a moment, Alex didn't know what to say. He wasn't sure if she was joking, but there was something in the way she spoke, something in her presence that made him want to listen. Instead of laughing it off, he sat back, absorbing her words. So you're like royalty? He asked, still unsure. She nodded slowly. Yes. My family was once rulers of a kingdom in the stars, but everything changed. I lost my home, my people. Her voice trailed off, and Alex could see the pain in her eyes. I had to flee, and now I'm here alone. Alex stared at her for a long time. The silence between them was thick with unspoken thoughts. He didn't know whether to believe her or not. Her story was so outlandish, so beyond anything he could comprehend. Yet there was something about her that made it hard to dismiss. She wasn't acting like someone who was making up a tall tale. What happened? Alex finally asked, his curiosity overpowering his skepticism. Lyra took a deep breath, collecting her thoughts before speaking again. My home, my planet, it was destroyed. A war came, and with it my family. Everything I knew was lost in a matter of days. I had to leave, escape. I found my way here, but I'm being followed. The ones who destroyed my home, they'll come for me. And when they do, they won't stop until they've taken everything from me. Alex's heart raced as the gravity of her words sank in. He couldn't imagine losing everything. His life, as simple as it was, had been free of such horrors. But here she was, sitting in front of him, her eyes filled with sadness and fear. Why are they after you? Alex asked, leaning forward. What do they want? Lyra's gaze shifted, as though she were weighing whether or not to reveal more. They want power, my family. My kingdom, we held something that they need, a power that could change everything, and I was the last one left. She paused, her eyes growing distant again. They think I hold the key to that power, but they don't know everything. I don't even know everything. Alex shook his head slowly, trying to make sense of it all. So what? You're saying you're a princess or something? Lyra hesitated before answering. Something like that. Her voice was soft, almost as if she were still coming to terms with her identity. I was the heir to a kingdom that ruled over many stars, but it's gone now, and I don't know if I can ever go back. Alex sat back in his chair, his mind spinning. He had always thought of the universe as vast, infinite, filled with mysteries. But he never imagined that one of those mysteries would come sitting on his couch, asking for help. He didn't know what to think. Part of him wanted to laugh at the idea, but another part of him, the part that had seen so many people come into his life with stories of hardship, couldn't dismiss her so easily. You must be pretty strong, he said, trying to make sense of her strength, her calm demeanor despite everything she had just told him. Lyra met his gaze, a faint smile tugging at her lips. I was trained to be, but even strength has limits, and right now I'm vulnerable. She looked away, her fingers idly tracing the edge of the towel she had used earlier. I don't know what to do. I thought I could hide, blend in with the world, but I'm being hunted. The people who destroyed my home won't stop until they find me. Alex frowned, his protective instincts kicking in. What can I do? I don't know anything about war or any of this, he said, gesturing vaguely, not sure how to express his confusion. Lyra met his eyes again, her expression serious. You've already done more than anyone else could. You've given me shelter, protection. That alone means everything. Alex felt a rush of warmth at her words, though he still didn't fully understand why he was involved in all of this. Why had she come to him? He was just a mechanic, but the more he thought about it, the more it felt like fate. There was something about her that made him feel like he needed to be a part of her journey, even if he didn't understand it. So what happens now? Alex asked, his voice filled with uncertainty. Lyra stood up, her movements smooth and fluid. She walked toward the window, looking out at the city below. The rain had stopped and the clouds were beginning to break apart, revealing the first signs of the moon. Now we wait. I need to stay hidden for as long as I can, but I know they will come for me, and when they do, I will have to fight. Alex stood up and moved toward her, unsure of what to say. You can't be alone in this. If they're coming for you, I'll help you fight. She turned to him, her violet eyes intense. You can't fight them, Alex. They're too powerful. I don't care, he said firmly. If they're coming for you, I'm not going to just let them take you. We'll figure something out, together. Lyra looked at him for a long moment, as if weighing his words. Finally, she nodded. You're more than just a mechanic, aren't you? Alex laughed softly, though it was a nervous laugh. I'm not sure about that, but I know that I can't sit back and do nothing while someone like you is in danger. Lyra smiled, a genuine smile this time. It was small, but it made her seem a little less distant, a little more human. Thank you, she said softly. I didn't expect anyone to care. Alex didn't know why he cared either, but he did. He had always thought his life was ordinary, simple. But now it felt like it was anything but, and maybe, just maybe, that was the way it was supposed to be. That night, Alex couldn't sleep. His mind was filled with images of distant stars, of kingdoms lost to the void of space. Of Lyra, the woman who had come into his life and turned it upside down. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going to let her face it alone. The next morning, Alex woke to the sound of soft footsteps. Lyra was standing by the window, gazing out at the city below. The sun had risen, casting a warm, golden light over the buildings. "You're still here," she said, her voice soft. "I thought maybe you'd changed your mind." Alex stepped into the room, offering her a small smile. "No chance of that. I'm in this whether I like it or not." Lyra turned to face him, a hint of gratitude in her expression. "Thank you, Alex. You don't know how much this means to me." Alex nodded. "I don't know what's going on, but I'm not going to leave you, not now." And just like that, everything changed. The life Alex had known, the quiet days spent fixing cars and living a simple life, seemed so far away now. The world he knew was gone, replaced by something much bigger, much more dangerous. But for the first time in his life, Alex felt like he was part of something important. And as Lyra turned back to the window, her face set in determination, Alex knew that he was in this until the end. The days following Lyra's arrival at Alex's apartment were a blur. He tried to continue his daily routine, fixing cars in the garage during the day, but his mind was never far from her. The strange sense of purpose that had gripped him when he offered her shelter didn't fade. If anything, it only grew stronger. He couldn't just go back to his old life, not now that he knew the truth. Alex had never been a fighter. He was just a mechanic. But the more time he spent with Lyra, the more he realized how deeply he cared for her. And the more he realized that he was willing to do whatever it took to keep her safe. The first few days, Lyra stayed mostly in his apartment, refusing to venture outside. She would sit by the window, staring out at the city below, her mind clearly preoccupied with something far beyond the city lights. She rarely spoke about the past, about her kingdom or what had happened to her people, but Alex could sense the weight of it in every gesture, every quiet moment. It wasn't until the fifth day that something shifted. Lyra had been more restless, moving around the apartment with a quiet energy, her gaze occasionally flicking toward the door. Alex knew something was coming. He couldn't explain it, but he felt it too. The tension in the air, the way Lyra seemed to be preparing herself for something. It was a Saturday, and Alex was working on a car in the garage when Lyra came down the stairs, her steps firm but controlled. He looked up from his work, wiping his hands on a rag, and saw her standing in the doorway. "I need to go," she said, her voice steady but filled with something Alex couldn't quite place. Alex wiped his hands again, frowning. "What do you mean, go where?" Lyra stepped into the room, her violet eyes fixed on him. "They're coming for me, I can feel it, and I can't hide forever." Alex froze, the air suddenly thick with tension. "Are you sure? I mean, maybe we can wait longer. Maybe they won't find you." Lyra shook her head. "No, Alex, they will come, and when they do, they won't stop until they have me. It's only a matter of time." She paused, her expression softening. "I know you're trying to protect me, but I can't stay hidden forever. I have to fight. I have to face them, or they'll keep chasing me, and everyone else." Alex stood there, his heart pounding in his chest. He didn't want her to leave. He didn't want to lose her, not after everything that had happened. But he knew she was right. They couldn't keep running forever. She wasn't just running from danger, she was running from her destiny, from the kingdom she was meant to lead. "If you leave, what are you going to do?" Alex asked quietly. Lyra looked at him, her gaze unwavering. "I'm going to find the others, my people. There are others like me who survived the destruction of my world. They've been scattered across the universe, but if I can find them, we can fight back. Together." Alex didn't know what to say. It sounded crazy, impossible even, but looking at Lyra standing there with that quiet strength, that unshakable resolve, he knew she wasn't just speaking in hope. She was speaking with certainty. He stepped closer to her, his voice low. "How can I help?" Lyra's eyes softened as she met his gaze. "You don't have to help, Alex. I've already dragged you into something you didn't sign up for, but I can't do this alone. I never could." Alex shook his head. "You're not alone. You've got me." For a moment, Lyra just looked at him, the weight of her emotions pressing down on her. She had been alone for so long, not just in the physical sense, but in every other way. The idea of someone standing beside her, truly beside her, was something she had almost forgotten. "All right," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "But you have to understand this is dangerous. They will come after you too." Alex didn't hesitate. "I'm not going anywhere." Lyra gave him a small, thankful smile before she turned away. "I'll need to make some preparations. We can't stay here. It's not safe anymore." Alex nodded, his mind already racing. They would have to move quickly. He didn't know exactly how, but he was willing to do whatever it took to help Lyra, to keep her safe. For the next few hours, they worked together, preparing for what was to come. Lyra packed a small bag with a few essential items, things she claimed she would need when they left. Alex, meanwhile, made a call to a few trusted people, arranging a safe place to go once they were ready. He didn't know what he was getting into, but he knew he couldn't let Lyra face this alone. By late afternoon, everything was set. They were ready to leave the apartment and head into the unknown. As Alex grabbed his keys, Lyra turned to him, her eyes serious. "Are you sure about this?" she asked. "You're not just helping because you feel like you have to, are you?" Alex smiled faintly. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." Lyra nodded, a look of gratitude crossing her face. "All right, let's go." They left the apartment, heading out into the streets. Alex's truck was parked nearby, waiting for them. It was a quiet drive, the city streets passing by in a blur as they moved through the city, away from everything Alex had known. As they approached the edge of town, Lyra suddenly tensed, her eyes scanning the surroundings. Alex noticed the change in her demeanor immediately. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice sharp. "They're here," she whispered. Before Alex could ask what she meant, he heard the unmistakable sound of engines in the distance. Low, rumbling, almost mechanical. As the noise grew louder, Alex's heart skipped a beat. "They're coming," Lyra said, her voice filled with urgency. "We need to move faster." Alex slammed his foot on the gas pedal, the truck speeding up as the engines in the distance grew closer. Lyra's eyes never left the rearview mirror, her gaze fixed on something only she could see. "We won't outrun them," she said, her voice tense. "But we can try to lose them, head to the old industrial district." Alex nodded, his grip tightening on the steering wheel. "Hang on." The truck sped down the darkened streets, weaving through traffic, making sharp turns as they raced toward the industrial district. Alex didn't know why that place came to mind, but it felt right. They needed to disappear, to hide. As they reached the outskirts of the city, the sound of engines behind them grew louder. It wasn't just one vehicle anymore, there were multiple. The chase had begun. Lyra's hands were clenched tightly in her lap, her eyes focused on the horizon ahead. Alex glanced at her, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on him. He had no idea what he was doing. No idea how to protect her, how to stop the people coming after them, but he wasn't going to give up. "We'll make it," Alex muttered to himself. They reached the industrial district just as the first of the vehicles behind them came into view. Alex turned onto an old, narrow road that led into the maze of abandoned warehouses and factories. It was the perfect place to hide, if they could make it. But as the trucks pursuing them turned onto the same road, Alex knew they were far from safe. The next few minutes would decide everything. Lyra's voice broke through his thoughts, steady and calm. "We're not alone, Alex. There are more of us. We just have to find them." "I'm with you," Alex replied, his words unwavering. And as the sounds of the pursuit grew louder, Alex pushed the gas pedal to the floor, determined to do whatever it took to protect her. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going to let her face it alone. The engine of the truck roared as Alex pushed it to its limits, weaving through the narrow, winding streets of the industrial district. The headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the empty, abandoned buildings around them. It was the perfect place to hide, but Alex knew they didn't have much time. The sound of the pursuing vehicles behind them was growing louder by the second, the heavy rumble of their engines vibrating through the air. Lyra was sitting beside him, her gaze focused ahead, her hands resting on her lap. She didn't seem afraid, not in the way Alex would expect someone to be when being chased, but there was a quiet tension in her posture. He could feel it, too. This was more than just a simple chase, it was a matter of life and death. "Are we going to make it?" Alex asked, his voice strained with uncertainty. Lyra didn't answer immediately. She was scanning their surroundings, her eyes darting from the rearview mirror to the dark streets around them. Finally, she spoke, her voice calm but firm. "We can make it," she said, though Alex could hear the quiet edge of urgency in her tone. "But we need to move faster. They'll track us. They have ways of finding us even here." Alex's grip tightened on the steering wheel. He could feel the weight of her words sinking in. They weren't just running from a group of enemies. They were running from something much larger, something far more powerful. He didn't know exactly what Lyra had been through, what her people had suffered, but he knew one thing for sure. It wasn't just her life on the line. It was the entire fate of her kingdom, and possibly the entire galaxy. They turned a sharp corner, the truck's tires screeching as it slid around the bend. Alex's heart raced as they entered a large, open area surrounded by tall, rusted buildings. It looked like a graveyard for old machinery and abandoned warehouses. It was perfect for hiding, but it also felt like a trap. If the pursuers knew this area as well as Lyra did, they wouldn't be safe for long. "We need to find cover," Lyra said, her voice tight with concentration. "Now!" Alex didn't hesitate. He turned the wheel sharply, heading for a small alley between two warehouses. He was hoping it would provide some shelter, some way to shake the pursuit. The truck bumped over a few potholes as they sped down the alley, but Alex couldn't afford to slow down. Suddenly, a loud explosion rocked the night air. Alex's heart jumped in his chest as the sound of the blast echoed around them. His hands gripped the wheel harder as he glanced in the rearview mirror. One of the pursuing vehicles had exploded, its wreckage sending a bright flash of light into the night. Lyra didn't flinch. She kept her eyes forward, but Alex could see the tension in her shoulders. They were under attack, but they were not the only ones. Whoever had been chasing them had been forced into action, and that meant they weren't alone anymore. "That wasn't them," Lyra said, her voice steady despite the chaos. That's my people." Alex didn't know how to respond. He had always imagined battles and conflicts happening in some distant place, in a world far away. But now it was happening in front of him. He was in the middle of a war that had started long before he ever met Lyra, but one that was now pulling him in whether he liked it or not. "What do we do?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Lyra glanced at him, her expression serious. "We find them. We can't let this go on, we have to fight." Alex felt his heart race. He wasn't a soldier, he had no training in combat. His whole life had been about fixing cars, about simple, everyday work. But this was different. This was life and death, and he had already made the decision to stand by Lyra's side. "All right," he said, his voice shaking but resolute. "Let's do this." They drove further into the maze of abandoned buildings, moving quickly to avoid detection. The sound of their truck's engine was muffled by the thick walls of the factories around them. They passed broken windows, rusted machinery, and piles of old scrap metal. It was eerie, like a ghost town, and Alex couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Lyra sat up straighter in her seat, her eyes scanning the darkness. She was listening, waiting for something. Alex could tell she was feeling the tension, too. Every corner they turned, every empty street they passed, only made him more aware of how dangerous their situation was. After what felt like an eternity, Lyra suddenly pointed ahead. "There, that's where we need to go." Alex followed her gaze, spotting a small, dimly lit building at the end of the alley. It looked abandoned, but there was a faint glow coming from inside. As they drew closer, Alex could see shadows moving inside, and his heart skipped a beat. This was it. This was where they were supposed to meet her people. He slowed the truck down, the engine's hum barely a whisper now as they neared the building. "Stay close," Lyra whispered. "I don't know who's here, but we can't take chances." Alex nodded, his breath shallow. He had never felt so out of his depth, but Lyra was right. He wasn't just helping her anymore. He was part of something bigger, and even if he didn't fully understand it, he was committed. The truck came to a stop just outside the building. Lyra was already unbuckling her seatbelt, ready to get out. "Stay low," she advised, her voice cold and sharp. "And be quiet." They both exited the truck, the air cold against their skin. Lyra moved with practiced ease, her eyes alert, her body tense but controlled. Alex followed her, trying to keep up with her quick pace. His feet seemed to echo in the silence, and he couldn't help but feel exposed. As they reached the door to the building, Lyra paused, her hand on the handle. She looked at Alex, her expression unreadable. "You ready?" she asked. Alex nodded. "Let's go." With a quick motion, Lyra opened the door and slipped inside. Alex followed her, stepping into the dim light of the building. The air inside was stale, filled with the scent of dust and old machinery. It was quiet, too quiet. Alex couldn't hear anything, and that made him uneasy. Lyra moved swiftly through the room, her eyes scanning every corner, every shadow. Alex followed closely, trying to stay out of sight. He wasn't sure what to expect, but it wasn't long before he heard the sound of footsteps. He tensed, ready for anything, but Lyra's calm voice immediately put him at ease. "Relax," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "It's them." Out of the shadows, figures slowly emerged. They were taller than average, their skin a faint shade of blue, and their eyes were not unlike Lyra's bright violet, glowing faintly in the dark. They looked like soldiers, but there was something in their posture that spoke of something more, a deep, ancient wisdom. Lyra stepped forward, her hands raised in a gesture of peace. "I'm here," she said, her voice strong and clear. "We can fight together." The leader of the group stepped forward. He was older, his face weathered but dignified. He looked at Lyra with a mixture of pride and concern. "You've come," he said, his voice low but filled with authority. "But it's not safe yet." Lyra nodded. "I know, but we don't have time. We need to move quickly." Alex stood back, feeling like an outsider in a world he didn't understand. He had always been just a man fixing engines, a simple mechanic. But now he was part of something that was bigger than him, bigger than anything he had ever known. The leader turned to him, his eyes narrowing slightly. "And you are?" Alex straightened, his jaw set. "I'm with her," he said, his voice firm. "I'm not leaving her side." For a moment, the leader just looked at him, his expression unreadable. Then, with a slow nod, he stepped aside. "Then you fight with us. We need every hand we can get." Lyra glanced at Alex, her expression softening for just a moment. "Thank you," she said quietly, her words filled with gratitude. "I couldn't do this without you." Alex nodded, his chest tight with a mix of emotions. He had no idea what was coming next, but for the first time in his life, he felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. They gathered their things and moved deeper into the building, preparing for the fight that was coming. It wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to be quick. But Alex knew one thing: he wasn't going to let her face it alone. Together, they would fight.